Good afternoon. This meeting of the Community Development Board is called to order at 1 p.m. on June 17th. Welcome, everyone. Let's begin the meeting today with the Pledge of Allegiance. If you all rise and please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This board consists of 7 members and 1 alternate who are appointed by the City Council and serve voluntarily. I am Michael Butzkas, and I will ask the other members and the staff to introduce themselves, beginning on my left.
Andy Park, Mike Mastrosario,
Jay Daniel, attorney for the board.
Rosemary Call, City Clerk.
Matthew Midge, Assistant City Attorney.
Ted Kozak, Planning Development.
Lauren Matzke, Planning and Development.
Kurt Heinrichs,
Michelle Chenault.
Andrew Hupp.
Please remember to turn off your cell phones so they do not become a distraction during the meeting. Please also refrain from having conversations in this room so we might hear all the testimony given today. To ensure a complete record of this board's actions, we ask that each individual wishing to speak, including the applicant, speak into the microphone at the podium in front of us. Clearly state your name and spell your last name for the clerk. Now I'll ask all those in attendance today who plan to speak to please rise and be sworn in by the clerk.
Raise your right hand. Do you affirm to tell the truth throughout your entire testimony?
I do.
Thank you. Agendas of today's meeting are on the podium to your left near the entry door. Also on this podium are a roster of the Community Development Board, the list of city staff experts and their resumes, the board's rules of procedure, and the annual schedule of this board. Our first order of business is to review and approve the minutes from last month's meeting. If everyone's had a chance to review them, may I have a motion for approval?
I'll make the motion to approve. Second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Next item on our agenda, items that are not scheduled for hearing on the agenda today. Is there any person wishing to address the board concerning any matter that does not appear on today's agenda? Quieter than last month. That's good. This board has adopted the consent agenda format, and the consent items are identified as such on the agenda. Consent agenda items are those items for which the Planning and Development Department recommends approval, and the applicant is in agreement with any proposed conditions. Please note that written comments to the case that have been received to date do not result in any item being removed from the consent agenda. Items may be removed from the consent agenda today by a member of the board, a member of the staff, or any person in the audience for questions or objections. I'll read each item on the consent agenda, and if any person wishes to remove this item from the consent agenda, please so state or raise your hand, and we will remove it from the consent agenda. Items removed from the consent agenda will be heard in the regular order of the meeting. Items that remain on the consent agenda will be approved with a single vote as to each type of hearing. Get my final agenda here with the hearings. For today's consent agenda, we have 2 items. We'll take them separately. The first one is FLD 2025-03006, flexible development approval for 135 overnight accommodation units, 20,000 square feet of retail space, 6,825 square feet of restaurant area, and approximately 160,795 square foot parking garage within the tourist district in the small motel character district of Beach by Design for the property located at 405 Coronado Drive. Does anybody want to have this matter removed from the consent agenda? Seeing none, is there a motion on this matter? There's a motion to continue the next one, so I might want to continue the next one, so we're going to take them separately.
Okay. I make a motion to approve FLD 2025-03006.
Do you want to,
Second it.
second? Do you want to just follow the format on the consent agenda for the, from our template? Just so we get the evidence and the staff report and everything included in there?
I can read it. I don't have witnesses.
You got it?
Okay.
Thanks.
I move to approve case number FLD 2025-03006 on today's consent agenda based on the evidence in the record, including the application and the staff report, and hereby adopt the findings of fact and conclusions of law stated in the staff reports with conditions of approval as listed.
All right, that'd be a amended motion to Mr. Mastrosario. Is that okay with you, Mr. Mastrosario?
That's fine.
Is that okay with the second?
Thank you for helping.
Second.
Yeah, that's okay with the second. It's already seconded then, and All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. Next item is TDR 2025-03001. It was a transfer of development rights. There was a memorandum in the file that was provided to us asking to continue this to the August meeting. Let me pull that memo up, sorry. It was August 19th meeting?
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct.
We can either discuss that, or if anybody has a motion to continue item TDR 2025-03001 to August 19th meeting, please so make it.
I make a motion to move the meeting to August 19th.
Move that matter, TDR.
TDR 2025-03001.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Next on the agenda is a director's report.
Good
Good afternoon.
afternoon. Lauren Mansky again, Planning and Development. So I have a brief item for the board's consideration today. As you know, each month you set aside time for citizens to be heard on items that are not in front of the board as part of the consent or regular agenda. This practice has been in place for many years, but it actually was added sometime during my tenure here at the city. The board, I've learned, is not required to include this time for public comments for items specifically not on the agenda. So if the board wishes to remove that, it would require an amendment to the rules of procedure. I've prepared that just for the conversation, and if it is the board's pleasure, then we would need a vote to make those changes.
Okay. Thank you for presenting that. We had a conversation about it last month was a very unique opening to the meeting, as I kind of alluded to momentarily a few moments ago. And if it's not really a requirement, my concern is, I normally wouldn't really mind it, but my concern is that if it's being dropped from other boards, we're going to end up with all that here. And most of those comments weren't even something that we could address. I think that over the course of time that we've had this, Mr. Johnson has brought some real salient points to the board, but not a whole lot else has been brought up during that section. So I don't know that it's a loss to drop it, but I'll leave it up to discussion for the board and see if we have a motion to. Her recommendation basically strikes that line from the order of our meeting part of our rules. That's the only change in that rule.
If I can speak to it, the only thing, I just got an email from a citizen, and it says, just because a dude was speaking about Shelley Miscavige, either way, please do not remove our ability to speak in front of the CDB at their monthly meetings because of a few nutcases, especially since it may be needed for our future downtown issues. Just wanted to share that.
Appreciate that.
How many times have we had that occurrence over the last so many years?
In terms of the type of comments made, that was
First
the
year.
first time in my knowledge.
First time?
But relating to items not related to board business, like just people talking about anything.
I was off the board for a few years, but I was on.
It's
I would say,
quarter.
In my previous tenure on the board was when this came into play. I think it was probably about 2015 or 16, thereabouts, till the time I dropped off the board the first time in 2021 or 2022. I think it would probably be 3 to 5 meetings out of the year, there'd be somebody who would speak. Sometimes it'd be a couple people, sometimes none. More often than not, none, but there's some meetings you have 2 people speaking. I do think that Mr. Johnson is the one who presents the most to us, and actually really salient points. So I brought that up to balance both sides, because it may be an anomaly, it may be something that we just keep an eye on, and if we start getting this because they don't have this ability to address it, to get their clicks and their views and other meetings, because other boards are dropping it within the city, then we would do a future time. I'm fine with that as well. I just want to make sure that we had an opportunity to discuss it, because it was rather unique.
Chair, does the board have rights to inquire as to the topic of what a general citizen is going to speak about?
I wouldn't advise that you take it on a case-by-case basis. I would
Okay.
recommend either eliminating it altogether or keeping it altogether.
Okay.
Otherwise, you get into content-based,
Yeah.
viewpoint-based
Oh,
discrimination.
Yeah, then there may be, one person, as the chair of the board, may address it very objectively. Another person, as the chair of the board, may say, if that doesn't agree with my viewpoints, I'm not going to let them speak. And then how do you control that?
Okay, sorry, thank you.
Part of that bothers me is that they're using it to make money, a show to make money.
Yeah,
That's what
it's for clicks and views and those kind of things that feed off their advertisers and their revenue. It's and that's the part that annoys me as well. I have to agree with you.
But where people like Bill Johnson
Yeah.
offers good comments.
Right.
Yeah.
I think we should wait and see what occurs in the future and judge what we do.
Nothing would preclude us from taking this up again at a future
No.
date, right?
No.
Then I would agree with Mr. Howe.
All right, so I wouldn't, if we're not really inclined to pass a change, I won't even take a motion at all on this. I just think that we keep it open for consideration. And it's one of those things that if we see this recur or begin to recur more frequently, we can take it up and ask staff to bring it back again.
Because the other boards have excluded this.
Right.
Some have.
Some have. So it's a possibility.
The opportunities-
exists. They might be looking for a spot, they might find us.
The opportunities to do this are becoming fewer within the city. So if somebody wants to do that in the city government, through the city government process, there are going to be fewer opportunities. There will be the ones that are, which is fine. And I'm not opposed to leaving it on there. I didn't like what happened last month, but I think that, we didn't have an opportunity and there was no legal right to shut it down, so we had to let it go. So we can just keep it open for consideration, that's all. We agree? That's what we'll do then.
Thank you.
And we don't need anything else from a director's report.
No, I have nothing else to report.
Okay, appreciate that. Board members to be heard?
I have two things I'd like to bring up. Sure. I brought this up once before about opening our meetings with prayer. We tabled it at the time because I think we didn't have enough discussion or we didn't have enough people here that particular day. But I'd like to bring that up again. I think by opening in prayer, we ask God for deliverance and our direction, our discernment. And so I would like to put that back on. And we used to do it on the Community Development Board. They do it in City Council. And I would like to see that back on the Community Development Board.
Is that a motion?
Now, it's discussion first.
Discussion. I think we would need to direct staff to make an amendment to the rules to add for that to the rules. And I'm certainly not opposed to it. The questions that I have to be more procedural in terms of how do we make that work. Is there a short standard prayer that we have each time that we begin with, or do we open up for a prayer to be presented by different faiths and different, there's all kinds of options there because you don't want to become exclusionary in that context.
Correct.
And I pray regularly and look for guidance all the time, so I have no opposition to doing it one more time during a day.
And I think it can be amongst ourselves as one, but also we can bring in other faiths to do it. I mean, I think it is fair to say that, but I do want to honor our Lord in our meetings.
Jay, your thoughts on that as our counsel?
Yeah, you all know my opinion on this. I continue to recommend against this. Just out of prudence, not out of spirituality, not out of anything else other than legal prudence. It's just, it opens doors that otherwise nobody needs to walk through. We did. I've been on. I think I've represented this board for 13 years or so. When I first began, we did have a short prayer at the beginning. It was sort of a non-denominational, more of a civic invocation of good behavior and civility. Sure, I still have that somewhere. There's a couple of them that somebody would read. I read them from time to time. This is your call. I advise against it.
Okay.
But
There's no legal prohibition to it, but you're concerned about the...
there's not a legal prohibition to it. There are legal contours to it.
How does the city council do it?
I'm sorry?
How does the city council do it? Or
I don't know
how
what the
they-
city council does.
So my
they do it?
staff assists with that process. So we have a list of individuals who typically come or who volunteer, and we call, no matter what the faith is, to come at a meeting. And I will be honest with you, if you're going to do it, please consider the staff impact, because it does take time. Sometimes we can't find individuals to do it. either because of time or it's getting very difficult for individuals who want to do it and come attend to these meetings. Now, here at CDB, you don't have that issue. You had it last month, but like in council, where we have a group of individuals who were coming consistently, it's sometimes difficult to get individuals to volunteer their time just to do that. So sometimes it's very repetitive, and that is one concern, because we don't want to be so repetitive that it looks like we're excluding different members of other faiths. And so just something to consider.
It's kind of what I mean by legal gray areas. They get into, well, we had, 2 members of the Christian faith. How many members of other faiths do we need to have to balance that out? What is the constitutionally permissible balance? The fact of the matter is, in 2025, when you as we learned last month, when you surrender the microphone to folks that you don't know, look, most of the clergy has good intentions, good desires, good wishes, but you're going to get someone coming up there that's going to say something that is potentially problematic. It's just in my mind. And as you know, my firm represents multiple communities throughout Pinellas County and elsewhere. Most of them at this juncture have extinguished a prayer before their meetings. Some of them still have, and they restrict to the board members themselves. Some of them have a moment of silence, which I think is appropriate. I don't know. To me, I just think for the business this board does, my opinion is that it's legally unwise. Not that it's unlawful, it's not. It just, we have to answer all these legal questions that otherwise don't need to be answered. And I'm always happy to take the city's money, by the way. I'm always, I don't mean to talk myself out of business, but I mean, the constitutional considerations here need to be addressed. And so, for that reason, for what this board does, I find it legally imprudent.
Well, I think the biggest judge in the country is our Lord Almighty. So when I have to answer to him, that's what I answer for. So I'm not afraid to offer the prayer. I'm not afraid to, I'm happy to pay you more money if we get sued. It's a situation where that's what I believe in, and I think that we need to be strong in our faith.
So the last time when we were on the board, it was just the board members, and we were either given the option of reading the generic prayer, non-denominational, or giving our own. And I gave it a couple times. But do we know why it came off since then?
Because of legal considerations.
Okay. Was it challenged specifically, or just a...
It wasn't challenged for the board. There were multiple appellate opinions that began to be generated throughout the country as to whether this was permissible and what its legal contours were. And it was decided, to my recollection, that it simply the benefit was not worth the risk. And I hear Mr. Mastro-Seri, and I've discussed this, by the way, on multiple occasions.
Yeah, before I got on the board.
And I hear him saying our faith, but that's one of the issues, is that we don't all share the same faith.
But we do.
Right? We may or may not.
You're a Catholic, I'm a Christian, we serve the same Lord. So,
Well, I think the Pledge of Allegiance kind of covers that in a way, does it not?
One nation under God.
One nation under God.
When you were saying previously that, was it rotated, like each month? or
No, the
different?
president would basically grab somebody at the end of the meeting and say, will you do it next meeting? Or he'd get you right as you came in early. So that's why I stopped coming in early, because I didn't want to
There were a couple of scripts.
And if they failed to do it, then I'm not elected.
There were a couple of scripts that you didn't have to make a prayer off the top of your head. That gets uncomfortable for a lot of folks. And I think that if we were to do this, I wouldn't want to make it taxing on staff, but I also wouldn't mind if it were opened up. So, for example, if we were to do this, we had a couple of scripts that amongst us, one of the members could read each month, and then maybe once a month invite somebody, rather than try and do it on a weekly basis where you really are taxing folks. And if they don't have somebody by 5 days before the meeting, let us know, and one of us will do it. And don't try and not stress about it. It is, you get a guest, great. You don't get a guest, not the end of the world.
Could it,
I mean,
I interrupted you.
Go ahead.
Could it be a certain board member's
Like a
It's a
chaplain?
responsibility to each month, up to and including saying I don't want to participate or invite someone and they don't have that obligation.
Like a chaplain?
I think these are the kind of things that Jay's talking about in terms of you start adding complications and being selective, not selective. But I also don't want to put anybody in an uncomfortable position and say, you've got to say it. If I were to ask you and you say, no, I'm not comfortable saying it, I would respect it. I wouldn't announce it. I would simply have somebody else say it or say it myself.
I guess that's why I was
yeah,
wondering about the
yeah.
rotating nature. If someone feels passionate, they have the ability, if, for the sake of the argument, you or I said, hey, I have zero interest in participating in that, I'm not going to do that this month. Not that that's my, but, you
Yeah.
know, we represent hypothetically, a diverse group of individuals.
Yeah, and my preference actually is that there be a couple of scripts, because I'm Greek Orthodox, I know my faith well, but I don't necessarily do a Greek Orthodox prayer here. I just want to look to God for guidance, and be generic enough in that way so God could be what it means to you in your faith and your religion, as compared to, you know, and to tell you, as much as my faith is, you know, strongly based around Jesus Christ, the reality is when I hear governmental prayers and they invoke Jesus Christ, that starts to exclude a whole lot of people. And that's where I think we run into the issues that are of concern. And the more non-denominational, the more generic ones are really more preferential. It satisfies both the need for those, it also broadens it to what you may perceive as your God to be. And that I think that's, if we're going to go down that path, I would prefer something like that than having it be, I hate to use the phrase over the top, but have it be so specific that it's one religion over others. Because then you have to, then I think the struggle becomes very real in terms of making sure at some course sometime during the course of the year or over a period of time, you've got to make sure you've hit all of the religions. I don't think it's fair, and they may say, we'll pass. You may reach out to an imam at a mosque who says, no, I don't want to do it. So you move on, and you don't do that. Or you do come in. But you do have to, if you start getting too specific in the prayer, you start requiring many different versions of prayer. And that's where I think Jay's concern is. I think it's probably where the appellate decisions went down to. At what point do you become exclusionary when you start doing the same thing over and over and others aren't getting a chance to have their
Right, when the
faith
Church
heard.
of Demonic Satan Worshiping Axe Murderers wants to come in, and where do you draw the line? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You have to draw those lines, and courts draw them for you, and that's what I'm trying to avoid with this board. I recognize the arguments for and against, just from a legal perspective. It creates more problems than it solves.
I'd like to approach it this way. I think that it would require, let's do it this way. Next meeting, I'd like everybody's thoughts during our discussion at the end on whether it's something where we do it or don't do it, and if we're going to do it, what your vision of it would be. Because right now we're bringing it up, but I'd like to get everybody's vision on it and see how much consensus there is on that. I don't want to make it overly challenging. I don't want to start shutting people down, but I think that it's something I'd like to see, but I also recognize the challenges of it. So we got to come up with a solution that we've got consensus on to be able to do that. So if each of you all, and those who aren't here where they see the meeting minutes and so on, come next time with some thoughts. I have a couple of thoughts on it that, without getting overly detailed, but the lawyer mind's already kind of clicking into gear about, okay, what about this and this and this? I don't know that I want to talk it out on this forum until I've gathered my thoughts some more, but I do like.
I can agree with that. I think it's good that we go to the Lord and ask for our decisions.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. All
I'm
right,
going
so-
to ask the city attorney in the meantime if he wishes for me to memo you all on the contours of this law. It's pretty complex. It's going to take some time. I'm sure he'll, approve it, but I work on a budget, so to speak. So
Okay.
I don't want to be out there spending
Yeah, if you could,
time and money on issues that.
yeah, that would be ideal. If we can get, if we know what the parameters would be on that, that would help us formulate what would work, or give us the least amount of, mitigate our risk of challenge, let's put it that way. We're not going to get rid of it in today's world.
Okay.
You said you had two
I
things you wanted to
second
bring
that,
up.
yes. This was brought to my attention. This is city business. This is in regards to the letter that was handed down from the Attorney General to the mayor. I felt it was important to speak today following a letter recently sent the Florida Attorney General to the mayor. The letter applies pressure on the city leadership to consider vacating South Garden Avenue and even raise the threat of legal action on the grounds of religious discrimination. While I respect the role of state officials, I want to be clear. The city of Clearwater must ground its decision not in political pressure or fear of litigation, but its standards clearly laid out in our town development code. One of the most important of those standards is found in section C-502A, which states, the existing street network shall be maintained. The vacation of an existing public street and alley shall be discouraged unless the new public street and alley are constructed to replace and serve the function of those vacated. This is not a suggestion, it's a planning requirement, and for good reason. Streets are public assets. They serve not just cars, but people, businesses, emergency services, and long-term flow of healthy downtown. In the case of a street vacation like the one in question, the code requires that any vacated street be replaced with a new public street that serves the same function. That means maintaining access, connectivity, and circulation. Replacing a downtown corridor like Garden Avenue is not a simple matter. In fact, I don't believe it's feasible in this case. Without a clearly defined functional replacement, such a request fails to meet the standard by our own code. I want to emphasize this is not about politics or personalities. This is about preserving the integrity of our planning process. The Community Development Board was created to ensure that development proposals align with the principles we put in place. Principles that exist to protect the public interest and not serve private agendas. Even when matters fall outside the board's direct purview, I believe we as board members and as citizens have the responsibility to speak up when the code is at risk of being disregarded or undermined. I urge our city leaders to remember that strength comes from consistency. If we follow our codes without bending to outside influence, we protect not just our streets, but the trust of our citizens. Thank you.
Thank you.
And if anybody needs a copy, I've got copies.
Mike, that letter was from who to who? I know it's to the city mayor, but who is it from again? The Florida
It was
State
from the Attorney General, State Attorney General.
Okay.
And this was your response to that?
I just felt because I'm on the board and somebody brought up the code and I read it. And so that was my thoughts that came from it.
Appreciate your thoughts on that. Any other discussions amongst the board? There being none, we are adjourned for today.
Sorry to take longer than you thought.